In the summer of 1942, Stalingrad was no longer just a city on the Volga. It was a verdict. From the air, it looked like a wound that refused to close. Blocks of shattered brick, skeletal factories, streets reduced to gray dust. Smoke hung permanently over the river, like a funeral veil. Nothing here smelled of life anymore. Everything smelled of burned metal, wet stone, and death that had been waiting too long. Private Ivan Petrov, 19 years old, stood at the edge of a half-collapsed trench near the Red October factory and tried to remember what silence sounded like. He couldn't. The city screamed day and night: artillery, aircraft, collapsing buildings. Men crying out in languages that no longer mattered. German, Russian, it all blended into the same sound. Survival tearing at the throat. Ivan had arrived 3 weeks earlier, ferried across the Volga at night in a flat-bottomed boat, while German flares turned the river into a glowing graveyard. The officer who handed him a rifle didn't even ask his name. "Hold this line," the man said. "If you retreat, you die. If you stay, maybe you live." That was Stalingrad's logic. Ivan stayed. The factory ruins became his world. There were no front lines anymore, just floors, walls, staircases, basements. Every room could be German territory by nightfall. Every hallway could be death. Ivan's unit, what remained of it, consisted of 9 men. At least, that was how many were alive that morning. By evening, the number often changed. They slept in shifts of 20 minutes. They ate frozen bread soaked in river water. They fought at distances so close that rifles were often useless. Knives, shovels, bare hands did the work. Ivan learned to recognize German boots by sound. He learned how to stay motionless for hours inside rubble, breathing through a torn sleeve to hide the steam from his breath. He learned that fear never disappears, it just becomes quieter. And slowly, something else happened. The city stopped feeling foreign. It became personal. One afternoon, after a bombardment that lasted nearly 6 hours, Ivan was ordered to scout a lower floor of the factory. He moved carefully, stepping over broken glass and twisted steel. The air was thick with dust. His ears rang. Then he saw movement. A German soldier, young, blonde, terrified, stood frozen at the far end of the corridor. His rifle was raised. So was Ivan's. For one endless second, neither fired. The German's hands trembled. He looked no older than Ivan. Then, without warning, the German lowered his weapon, backed away, and disappeared into the smoke. Ivan stood there, heart pounding. He never told anyone. That night, he wondered if the man had spared him or simply couldn't pull the trigger. In Stalingrad, even mercy felt dangerous. By November, winter crushed the city. Temperatures fell below -30°C. Snow covered corpses where they lay. Blood froze black on the ground. The Germans began to starve. Ivan's unit noticed it first by sound: fewer boots, fewer shouts. Prisoners captured during night raids looked hollow-eyed, barely standing. Then came the encirclement. Operation Uranus closed the steel ring around the 6th Army. For the first time, Ivan felt something he had not felt since the war began. Hope, but hope was fragile. In December, Ivan was assigned to hold a basement near the Volga embankment. The basement housed a field hospital. Inside were wounded men, medics, and civilians who had nowhere else to go. If the Germans broke through, everyone inside would be slaughtered. Ivan volunteered to stay behind when his unit rotated. "I'll hold it," he said simply. No one argued. For 6 days, he barely slept. German patrols tested the position constantly. Grenades rolled down the stairs. Bullets chipped concrete inches from his head. Ivan fired sparingly. Every shot mattered. On the 5th night, German voices echoed above. They were close. Too close. Ivan waited until he could see boots descending the stairs. He fired. One fell. Another screamed. Then silence. They didn't come back. In February 1943, the shooting stopped. At first, No one believed it. Then German soldiers began to emerge from the ruins unarmed, shaking, barely alive. Tens of thousands of them. Ivan stood by the Volga as they passed. He recognized the blonde soldier, the one who had lowered his rifle months earlier. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. The German nodded once. Ivan nodded back. That was all. Ivan Petrov survived the war. He returned to a rebuilt Stalingrad, now Volgograd, and worked as a machinist for 37 years. He never spoke of what he did in the factory. He never sought medals. When asked once why he stayed behind in the basement, he answered, "Someone had to." He died in 1991. His name is not in textbooks, but the people who lived because he stayed remembered. And sometimes, that is enough. Epilogue. Why? These stories matter. This story is not about victory. It is not about flags or generals. It is about ordinary people placed in impossible circumstances and choosing to remain human. War destroys cities, but it also reveals who we are when everything else is stripped away. And as long as these stories are told, those who endured will not vanish into silence.